Shalom, I am Dr. Ann Davis with Bible Interact, and twice I have spent time with the Bedouin in Israel. The reason that I go to Israel is to explore biblical sites. I like to make the story of the Bible come alive, and of course you can do that by going to Israel and actually visiting the site where these things happened. So I'm going to take you with me now on a journey to visit Israeli Bedouins. I'm kind of combining my two trips into one. And what you'll find is that the Bedouins are nomadic Arab people who have traditionally inhabited desert areas in the Near East. When Israel became a state, these nomadic Bedouin were now kind of caught into nation states. Many of them went to Jordan, some of them went to Egypt, there were some that remained in Israel, and those that remained in Israel became citizens of Israel. They're citizens of Israel, but their life is very different from most Israelis. They belong to clans, they live in tents, and raise camels that can adapt to the desert environment. Their religion is Islam. Israel has been trying to move them to Bedouin villages so they can provide utilities, medical care, and schools. This has not been very successful, and I'll explain that as we travel into the Bedouin area. Let's take a look at where we're going to go. We'll start in Jerusalem, and then we're going to go down through the hill country of Judea, which is really a great place to see. Here it is here. It's beautiful. It's there are not a lot of people villages. It's pristine hill country. It really is beautiful. And what we see, this is interesting because these were terraced hills used for growing grapevines and olive trees and other things. Now, when before Israel became a state, these were being irrigated and used, but after the Israelis took over, they're not farmers, so they don't use them. So these are now abandoned. You see them as you go through the Judean hills. You see these abandoned terraced hills. From there, we're going to continue down to Beersheba. Now, Beersheba is the English way of saying it. In Hebrew, it's Be'er Sheva. It's two words. Be'er is well. Sheva is seven wells. Be'er Sheva. We're not going to spend much time in the city of Be'er Sheva. We're going to just a few miles outside to the east is a tell site of the original city of Be'er Sheva at the time of Abraham and Isaac, and that's really kind of exciting to see. Then, from the city, we're going to, in a car, we're going to drive west, and we're going to come to a kibbutz, Kibbutz Lahav. There's something very interesting there about Bedouin culture in the Kibbutz Lahav. From there, we're going to go over to the border with Gaza. And that now becomes a very interesting story because I am now speaking as the Hamas from Gaza have entered and captured over 100 people that they're holding, and many Israelites were killed. It's right now, as I speak, it's a standoff. Probably by the time that you hear this, it will no longer be a standoff, but as I speak, it's a standoff. And my experience there, right next to the Gaza Strip, is an interesting one I want to share with you. From there, we're going to go south into the Negev desert and to visit Bedouins. So this is what we're going to do on our trip. Here is Be'er Sheva, known as, now they spell it Beersheba, but it's pronounced Beersheba. It's a fairly large city, population of over 200,000. In fact, it's the 8th largest city in Israel, quite large. It was largely settled by immigrants. because it's right on the edge of the Negev desert. So when Jews, came in from all over the Arab countries, they had to put them somewhere. So they kind of put them out on the fringe, on the edge of the Negev desert. So there are just a lot of Jews of mixed heritage coming from Morocco, coming from Egypt, coming from Iraq and Iran, coming from Russia. They kind of planted them there. Ben Gurion University is there, and of course Ben Gurion was the first president of the state of Israel. And the university is a very an excellent university and has led to Beersheba being one of Israel's tech centers. It's not the only one. There's another one up just north of Tel Aviv that's a major tech center in Israel. But this now in Beersheba has become another tech center in Israel. We're not going to spend much time in this city. We're going to go just a couple of miles east to, before we do that, I'm going to spend one day in Beersheba, just one day, to go to the Bedouin market, which is a really interesting thing to see. It's just Bedouins, and they bring in their produce, and the Bedouins are the ones who are buying it, plus tourists, because it's a great tourist area. And here you see the men, and they're bargaining over sheep. And here are the women. Their religion is Islam. And so the women are covering their faces when they come into an area that's populated. When they're in their homes, they don't necessarily have to cover their faces unless there's an outsider coming in, and then they will. In fact, they won't even appear. They'll just stay in the tent. So it's a wonderful place to visit, great photographs, the weekly Beersheba Bedouin market. Now we're ready to go just a couple of miles to the east to Tel Beersheba National Park. The Tel is often recognized by this large mound. And we took a picture of it because as we approach, you can see that mound. And because the original town would have been built up on a high place for protection. But each time it was destroyed, it would be rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, and it kept getting higher and higher and higher. So a tel means a mound. It's this large mound, and you see them throughout Israel when you drive because a lot of these tel sites have not been excavated. And this particular one you can see, but it has been excavated. We're going to go in and take a look. When we first get there, we enter, there's a well outside the gate, and then the opening was the original gate. Now, the city would have been a wall city with, actually, it was two rings of walls. And the gate would have been made of wood, and that was the most susceptible part of the city, so that an enemy would typically enter or try to enter at the gate. But it's an awesome sight to walk through that area and realize that you're walking into what would have been the ancient city of Beersheba when Abraham and Isaac were there. You walk around and you see typical ruins. Some of them are labeled. This was a 4-room house. Some of them are labeled. But for the most part, it's ruins. But there was one part that was really very interesting, and that was the water system of Tel Beersheba. And you go down, you can walk down on the stone steps, and there's a huge area for collecting water, fairly deep down, and that's both underwater and collection of water from the wadi that runs there beside the ancient city. So that was interesting to see the source of their water. Of course, water was important because there's a rainy season, which starts in about October through March or April, around there. It's the winter time. And then starting around in April, it is drier than a bone. And it's very hot, very dry. So they have to collect water for the dry months. They also have to have water if an enemy comes and they're inside their walled city, but they have to have a source of water. Now, the most interesting thing I thought was this four-horned altar. When it was first discovered by archaeologists, it was it wasn't full standing. It had been kind of pulled apart, and the stones, in fact, a couple of the stones had been used in rebuilding. So the archaeologists reconstructed it as it would have been. The original now is in the Israel Museum, and this is an actual reconstruction of the original in the Israel Museum. But it's a four-horned altar, and that was typical of the altar in Jerusalem. And of course, if someone, was being had fled from an enemy tribe, an enemy clan, and they could come into the temple and grab hold of one of the horns of the altar, they could not be killed until there was essentially a typical trial where there had to be at least 2 or 3 witnesses to judge against the person for the person to be declared guilty. But that was kind of interesting to see. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to travel from Beersheba. We're going to go on the other way toward the west to a kibbutz known as Kibbutz Lahav. Lahav means either blade or flame of fire, and I'm not quite sure why it was named Kibbutz Lahav. I don't know. So when you enter the kibbutz, immediately you come to a place which is the Joe Alone Center of Bedouin Culture. Now, who was Joe Alone? He grew up in Czechoslovakia. He's a Jew, grew up in Czechoslovakia. When the Nazis were getting stronger, and clearly there was going to be trouble and disaster, his parents sent him and his younger brother in what was called the Kinder Transport Program to England, which saved a lot of Jewish children. The parents didn't go, they sent the children, and the children lived with English families. And of course, at the end of the war, they tried to find their parents, and his parents had been killed in Auschwitz. And most of his family were eliminated by the Nazis. So he married a wife and 3 daughters, and together they returned to Israel. He wanted to be in the nation of Israel, and he became a pilot. He's a member of the Israeli Air Force. He also was very interested in the Bedouin culture, and he lived in the kibbutz with his wife and his daughters, and he spent a lot of time going out into the desert, getting to know the Bedouin, getting to know their culture. He was very, very interested in the Bedouins and the Bedouin culture, and he would bring back things to the kibbutz that he had collected from the Bedouins. He became the Israeli Air and Naval Attaché that was sent to Washington. So he was in Washington representing the Israeli Air Force and Navy. And while he was in Washington, he was assassinated. He was in his driveway. He and his wife had returned from some event. She was actually had gone first to the house and was in the doorway when she heard the gunshots and turned, and her husband was shot, I think 4 times, but one of them was in his heart, which was fatal. And the American FBI tried, I don't know how hard they tried to try to find who had done it. They never did, so we have no idea what happened, who did it and why. But that was back in 1973. So what we have in Kibbutz Lahav is a museum dedicated to Joe Alone, using many of the things that he brought back from his trip to the Bedouin. So let's take a look at the museum. The woman is not a live woman, it's a model, and she's demonstrating weaving, which is interesting because we're going to see a Bedouin woman who actually is a weaver in a few minutes. And then this is typical Bedouin food. The thing in the closest to us is holding bread, which is heated up over a wood fire. And here is laid out typical Bedouin food. And this is interesting because we're going to visit a Bedouin in the desert. And he's going to make the bread, and we don't see his wife except when she appears just for a minute to deliver the rest of the food, and then she just disappears because he's in charge. He's the head man of his family, and so he demonstrated how he made bread, but she brought all the rest of the food, and it looked like this. It came in. I'll show it to you. We're going to go out to that Bedouin camp in the desert. Another thing that Joe Alone did is he took a lot of photographs, and the photographs are on display. So this was a Bedouin village. You can see the tent. It's black tent. I think it was made from the hair of a camel. And the women are the one who put up the tent and pound in the tent pegs. You see the camel. They depend on camels for milk, for transportation, and for meat when the camels are no longer good for transport. And actually, that's true today. This was in the museum, and it showed how they carried on the backs of the camels everything they owned. And the jugs would have held water and probably food, but also the tent itself would have been carried on the backs of camels, and all their belongings were on the backs of camels as they moved from oasis to oasis, because they had to be somewhere in the desert where there was water. It was a live museum as well. And so this is a Bedouin woman who's demonstrating things for us, and she was wonderful. Here she is putting on a mask. It's a wonderful picture that my husband took, actually. He's an excellent photographer, and it just captured her and her personality. But she was demonstrating her culture. Now, the Bedouin tent is divided into two parts. 2/3 is for the men, 1/3 is for the women. And the tent was up, and it was open in the front, and we could see inside how they lived in the tents. There were men also in this live museum who were demonstrating certain things, including this man, which is interesting, demonstrating a musical instrument. And of course, it was made from plants in the desert. And it's almost like a violin or a guitar. We're going to leave the kibbutz, and we're going to go west all the way over the Gaza Strip. And we're going to go to another kibbutz right on the edge of the Gaza Strip. As we drive through this area, it's fairly level. It's not hilly. I mean, there are mounds, but it's not hilly. It's fairly flat. And along the way, it was kind of interesting to see. It wasn't a group of Bedouins. It was just a single man next to a well. We got out and were able to take a picture of that. We're going to visit in the Kibbutz Kisufim a woman called Yaela Ra'anan. She's an Israeli. I think she originally came from the United States as a fairly young woman. She is a professor of a university in Tel Beersheba, but she has dedicated her life to helping the Israeli Bedouin, who are really treated as second-class citizens in Israel. And so she arranged for us to go places to visit Bedouin and to get to know the Israeli Bedouin. Oh, let me show you this. This is interesting. There's the Gaza Strip. I've got the red outline around it. And you can see the Kibbutz Kesufim is right there on the border. She took us out to her kind of narrow backyard, and at the end of that was a wall. It wasn't a solid wall. It was like a chain link fence type of wall. Beyond that was an open area, which was like a no man's land. And on the other side of the open area were Gaza buildings and population. So she was right there on the border of the Gaza Strip. Now, I'm speaking now about a week or 10 days after October 7, when the Hamas, which are very militant Palestinians who control Gaza, had invaded the southern part of Israel in the area around Beersheba. The kibbutz Kesufim was actually the Hamas came into the kibbutz, and there were 8 kibbutz members killed. There were 6 Thai workers killed who were living in the kibbutz. 4 members of the kibbutz were kidnapped, and as I'm speaking, we don't know what is happening to them. Fortunately, 51st Golani Battalion, which was housed not too far from the kibbutz, came to the kibbutz. They just men rapidly came together and came to the kibbutz and confronted the Hamas soldiers. And the battle lasted for about 2 hours, maybe more than 2 hours. 8 soldiers were killed. While the battle was going on, the people of the kibbutz, including Yaela Ra'anan, were in their homes, locked into their homes and huddled into their homes while this fight was going on. When it was over, the Israeli soldiers evacuated all the members of the kibbutz. But when I went, of course, there was no danger. She took us out to the backyard, showed us, the no man's land that went to, and she's over there. Yeah, that's Gaza, right there. You can see it right here. And we asked her if she was, worried and frightened to be living there. Oh no, she really showed no fear of being in that location. I don't know what she thinks now. We're going to visit Salman in an unrecognized Bedouin village. What does it mean, unrecognized? Well, you see the red dot. Those are the unrecognized villages. There are about 40 of them. The state of Israel has tried very hard to get them to be recognized villages, where they have accepted Israeli control, and the villages are now, they don't live in tents anymore. The Israelis have built some buildings for them to live in, and they've only been successful in doing about 10. The unrecognized are Bedouins. They're living in clusters of tents out in the desert, and the Israelis are allowing them, as I speak, they're being allowed to live out there, but the Israelis are trying to figure out how to kind of bring them into the mainstream of Israel and give them what they need. The Israelis have also built Bedouin towns. There are 6 Bedouin towns. Now, when we went to the unrecognized Bedouin village, Salman, who is our host, our Bedouin host, explained that the Israelis there was a road up above, and in the road was water, so that they had a source of water, and his children were picked up by bus and taken to school every day. So even though they're in this unrecognized village living like original Bedouins in tents with camels, Israel is trying to provide them services in some way. Now, here's our host, Salman. And we were driven up the road, and then we climbed down to the area where he had his tent. And he welcomed us into his tent. He was the only one. There was no other member of his family. His wife, his children were not there. Now, let me show you. This is where they were living. It's kind of hard. It's not a very good picture, but it was kind of a put-together dwelling. And then outside of that was the tent. Here he is here. We're in the tent. And the flaps are open on all the sides. So we just have the tent covering us. The sun was really quite strong. I can't remember what part of the year, but it wasn't summer that we went, but it was still, the sun was really quite strong. He's making bread, and you see the bread there on that plate, and he puts the plate over a wood fire. You see the wood fire. Now, his wife appeared for about 2 minutes, and she brought a tray with the food. So she had made, remember when we were in the museum, it showed these, small portions of food, which is what we have here. Now in the middle is the bread that Salman made, and all around it are the dishes that the wife had made and just came and delivered them in the tent and then left. And she, by the way, had her head and face covered. Now we're going to go, we've left the Bedouin village. And by the way, he said that the camels were out, he lets them roam free out in the desert, so we couldn't see the camels. They were roaming free. We then went to the office of Hanan al-Sanaa, who is a Bedouin woman. She went to college and she became an attorney. She's a Bedouin attorney. She has dedicated her life to helping Bedouin women. Now, the Bedouin women are completely controlled by the men, but what she's done, she's the director of the Council of Unrecognized Villages. She helps women in the recognized villages to find employment. Now, women can't do anything without the permission of the husband. And she arranged for us to meet some Bedouin women. Very interesting woman. Miriam was made soaps and oils. She had earned a degree in marketing in London and created a company that she called natural cosmetics company called Desert Daughter. And she used the techniques from her grandmother with natural ingredients to make healing remedies. If you go to her website, you'll see the three types of lines. There's the camel milk line, the herbal healing line, and the anti-aging line. And if you want to see her website, it's desertdaughter.com. Then we went, very interesting, to another woman. This was sort of like a co-op. There were several women working to weave, and this was fascinating to see how long this weaving was, and they were selling their weaving. So we then went to throughout some of the recognized villages, which were really quite depressing. And a gentleman, T.S., wanted us to see the difficult conditions of recognized villages. And here's a picture of some, in one of the recognized villages. He wanted us to see that. So why is it important to know about the Bedouins? Well, Abraham came to Abimelech, who was the king of the people who lived in the area of Beersheba. And there was a dispute over the well, but Abraham made a pact with Abimelech, and that's why the place is called Beersheba, 7 wells. So with that, I wish you shalom, and I hope you enjoyed our visit to Bedouins in Israel.